D-BT04 has finally been released. It was a set that was very highly anticipated. I have been looking forward to it a lot because we got some really good support for our boy, Master of Gravity, Baromagnes. So I've actually already talked about Baromagnes in set 3 of overdress, and I did a whole video on it, and it was actually the first video for this channel overall, so you can catch that either in the iCard or in the description, wherever one of those places it'll show up. But I went over it in depth there, so I'll kind of touch on up a little bit here. Baromagnes is one of the boss units from Dark States. I think he is amazing. He is my favorite out of all of them. Most importantly, because of his ability to be able to wipe out your opponent's board and then also allow you to multi-attack. So what he does is when this unit attacks, you can counterblast 1 and perform all of the following abilities according to how many cards you have in your soul. So if you have 5 or more, you can draw a card. If you have 10 or more, Baromagnes will gain an additional 10,000 power and an additional critical. Then if you have 15 or more, you can actually put all units on both sides of the field into their respective soul. Then you are allowed to call out 2 units from your soul as stand and give them 10,000 power to the end of that turn. So what this means is that you get to draw a card, you get to get your Vanguard to be 10,000 plus attack and an additional critical, and you get to get rid of all of your opponent's units on board, putting them in the soul, which is kind of hard for them to pull out and use those units again. And then you also get to pull out 2 units that they themselves get 10,000 power. So even if you bring out a 4k critical trigger, it can still swing at Vanguard, assuming that it's just a 13k grade 3 that doesn't have any damage triggers on it, right? So that's just really good overall. The only main downside for this deck is that you can't, for example, do massive selective soul charging. That is to say, I can't just look at my deck, pick 5 cards that I want, put them into my deck. I could only soul charge or fill up my soul by soul charging, which is blindly taking the top couple cards of my deck and putting them into my soul, which means I can lose out on a lot of cards, a lot of pieces that I need to actually hit my requirements, anything that I need to guard, or my triggers, etc, etc. But overall, that's generally what you want to do with Baromagnes. Get to 15 soul, wipe the whole board, attack as much as possible, win the game. Let's go ahead and go over the ride line really quickly. Nothing has changed since basically D-BT01 when this ride line was first announced. I have sort of considered maybe using the Brainwash Swirler here as your grade 1, but I don't think that's really a good idea. In any case, you can use the Uncanny Bernie as your grade 0. It doesn't really matter who you use. You're only going to be able to just draw a card if you went second. That's all any of these starters will do for you now. Then we have our grade 1, which is the Deep Sonicer, on place on Vanguard Circle, Soul Charge 1, and then if he's on the Rearguard Circle, if you have 10 or more cards in your soul, he gets 10,000 power. If you combine this with Baromagnes' ability to pull him out, he'll get an additional 20,000 power, because it'll be 10 from Baromagnes and 10 from his own soul, from his own ability, which means he'll be a 28k attacker or booster, which makes him really solid. And you already automatically have 1 in soul, thanks to the ride line. Then the final piece here we have is Electro Spartan. When you ride over Electro Spartan with Baromagnes, you can, if you want, put a card from your hand into the soul, draw 1, and then soul charge 1. Then he also has an ability on Rearguard Circle on place where you can counter blast 1 to soul charge 2. What's really great about the ride line is that in combination with all of their effects and their actual bodies, you're actually able to automatically get 6 cards in soul by the time you reach Baromagnes, because Deep Sonicer here soul charges 1, so that's another card in soul, and as you saw, Electro Spartan lets you put a card in hand into your soul, and then you also soul charge 1, so that gives you a grand total of 6 cards just from the ride line alone. Let's go right ahead and on to the triggers here. We're going to be playing 4 of the Steam Deviant Dragon, the crit from set 3. This, when at the end of the battle, this unit boosts, you can put him into the soul, give a unit 2,000 power. The 2,000 power doesn't matter, but putting a unit into soul is really nice, because more often than not, sometimes you're stuck on like 14 soul and you just need just 1 more card to get you to soul. This helps out a lot, and also has dual purpose that it is, you know, a trigger so it can block and whatnot. We're going to play 1 additional crit in the 50 slasher here. Now, there's been a lot of sets or list, I should say, where everyone's playing 7 draw for Baromagnes, and that totally makes sense. I'll go over that in a second. But I just really like Finty Slasher, and I just got a holo of her, so I'm actually going to go ahead and use 5 crits here. But as I mentioned, everyone is using a bunch of draws. We ourselves are going to actually be running a total of 6. You want to make sure you are definitely, no matter what, playing 4 of the new draw trigger. The reason for this is that 1, it's a draw trigger. You need draws in order to make this deck work because you need so many pieces, or maybe not so many pieces, you have a, it's not necessarily a piece reliant deck, but you do need a lot of cards in order to like commit to get to where you need to be. So your hand tends to be pretty empty, right? And then you also want to make sure that you can do what you need to do when the time comes. But on top of that, she's also a 10k shield, or guarding I should say, not shielding, but guarding in this deck is actually pretty difficult. So as much shield as you can get, the better. I'm almost considering running like some fronts instead of crits or something like that, but we'll see how that goes. And then just, I'm only playing 2 of the other draw trigger. I don't really want to use 3 of them just because the 5k shield kind of hurts a lot. And to round out our triggers here, we are playing 4 of the heals, and then I have here, of course, PGs, because both of these cards let us not die. One lets us heal, one lets us guard. And finally, I am playing still the Cray Elemental overtrigger. The reason I'm still playing this is because I still think it's really good. You can check this with Baromagnes, give both of the units that you bought out 100 million power, which is really good because that's 2 attacks that you can swing in. Whereas with the Dark Stakes one, you give 1 unit 100 million power, and then you give Baromagnes continuously, or your Vanguard, for the rest of that game, 10,000 power and a crit, which is nice, but I feel like this is just overall way more effective. Alright, we can talk about the grade 1s now. Let's go ahead and talk about the main grade 1 here in the Brainwash Swirler. This is a brand new triple rare for Dark States that we got in set 4. This card is amazing. It's also very simple. It has 2 effects. First effect, on play, some real card, soul charge 1. Second effect, whenever a card soul charges, you get 5,000 power. This stacks. So for example, if I were to go ahead and use our good old buddy from sets 3, Pandemonium Tactics, which lets us soul charge 4, for every single card you soul charge, this guy is going to get 5,000 power, which means that this is going to be a humongous attacker or booster, which is very good and very versatile. You definitely want this in your hand when you do your big push on grade 3 in order to push you over to 15, because you're going to have a really deadly column, especially if you have 2 of these. Then the last grade 1 we're going to be playing here is actually going to be the Gormon. I'm just playing 1 copy of it. You really don't need more than 2, I think. I mean, you know, I have another card in this list where I'm playing a 1 of. You can, instead of that card, play another Goemon. Honestly, I haven't been able to make much use of Goemon at the moment. I've been aiming more to use some of these guys and like everything else. But he's still absolutely one of the best cards in Dark States overall. Going on to the grade 2s, you see here we're still playing 4 copies of Selfish Engraver. Selfish Engraver is an amazing card. She's been an amazing card since she's been released, and she still is 4 sets later. When her attack hits, soul charge 1, and then if at the end of the battle you have 10 or more cards in soul, put her into the soul, and then counter charge 1. Amazing. Great card, gives us the resources that we need to get the deck going. She's going to be a 4 of for a very long time, and she's a common, so if for some reason you don't have any yet, please go pick up multiple copies. Then hopping over to set 2, we have 3 of the Crimson Igspeller. Every time basically that I build this deck, in every single set, I end up dropping this card and then later on bringing it back. This card is pretty essential, even though I don't give him the credit for it. He's also really good now with Brainwash Swirler. So what makes Crimson Igspeller really good is, like I said, more often than not, you will be at like 14 soul and you just need 1 card to put you over. Crimson Igspeller is really good for that. He's also very good on turn 2 when you're on your grade 2 Vanguard and letting you be a little bit more aggressive, because you can use him still soul charged. You don't really have to save him up for your big turn, which is very nice. He also powers up your Brainwash Swirler if you want to be super aggressive that way. So he's really good. He also has an on soul effect, or I should say, let me back up a little bit. When you attack a Vanguard, he soul charges 1. That's his main ability that I'm talking about. You don't have to hit, you just have to swing at Vanguard, automatically soul charge. You could swing at a grade 17 Vanguard with 5 billion power. Doesn't matter, you still soul charge. Then his second effect is actually Insole. He's one of the few cards that we have in Dark States that actually has an Insole ability that doesn't only help Greed on. But what he does is, if he's Insole, you can counterblast 1, put him into the drop, Soul Charge 1, and then give your Vanguard 10,000 power. So that also powers up Brainwash Swirler again, powers up your Vanguard, all good all around. Then from set 3, we have the lovely Keenly Ludley here. She is great. I play only 2 of her. You could get away with only 1, but you might lose 1 to damage. You might have to guard with 1. I think 2 is pretty much the perfect number, but I guess you can cut 1 if you really need to make space. Overall, you definitely need at least 1 of this card. I think this card is great if your Vanguard is Baromagnes on place, counterblast 1, put as many normal units, so not triggers, but you can put back orders into your deck, shuffle your deck, and for each unit returned, she gets 5,000 power, which is great for 2 reasons. 1, you won't deck out. I mean, you're soul charging like crazy. It would be great to not deck out. On top of all of that, she also gets freaking huge. So if you just really need to push at the end of the game, you can bring her out, get her to like 9,000 power easily. And finally, the last grade 3 is going to be the Cutting Sword Dance Raw from set 4. We actually have a grade 2 from each set so far, which is really cool. It's gonna suck when they release something for set 5 and I'm gonna have to find space. So this is a new unit from set 4. It's very, very good. Basically what you can do on place, you perform all of the following abilities according to how many cards you have in soul. If you have 7 or more, you can counterblast 1, and then you discard a card, choose a card from your soul, add it to hand, and then you can go ahead and soul charge 1 and replace that card. So this essentially replaces Supernatural Extraction. While you can still play Supernatural Extraction if you want to soul charge some more, at the cost of only really being able to soul charge 1 more card and only being able to use that 1 order that turn, I really don't see a good argument for using Supernatural Extraction anymore unless you just don't run any Krieg Ra. They essentially do the same thing. Then his second effect is that all your front row units get 5,000 power. So if you go ahead and you play 2 of these, bring them out from the soul with Baromagnes' ability, he gives everyone else 5,000 power, he gives everyone else 5,000 power, then Baromagnes, who brought them out, gives them 10,000 power. Which means these guys are going to be swinging in for a nice chonky 30k, and also Baromagnes is powered up because it's all your front row units, not your front row rear guards. Then for the grade 3s, we're going to go to the bread and butter of this deck. It is 4 of the Phantasm Magician Curtis and 4 of the Pandemonium Tactics. Phantasm Magician Curtis on play, soul charge 2. Then he also has an act where you can counterblast 2 and give your front row 5,000 power. You don't usually use this. Counterblast 2 is really expensive for this deck, but it is a nice option to have. Then on the other side here we have Pandemonium Tactics, Counterblast 1, Soul Charge 4. You can ignore all those other checks because it's only for Bruce. All you care about is the Soul Charge 4. These guys in combination with your ride deck, if you have these 2 Curses and a Pandemonium Tactics, on your first grade 3 turn, you can automatically reach 14 soul. That plus your, a critical trigger that you can soul charge into, or a Crimson Make Speller, a Brainwash Swirler, any of that lets you hit your 15 soul on turn 1, or your first grade 3 turn to be said. Exactly. So that is why we play 4 copies of these, because we definitely want to see as many of them in hand. At least 1 Pandemonium and as many Curtises as possible. Then the last grade 3 that we're playing here, and the last card of the deck, is a new card from set 4, I should say, is the Aura Rate Haze Rupture. So I really tried this time to use the Persona Ride version and put in another Baromagnes in the main deck. It just doesn't work out. Every time I do that, I end up with a bunch of Baromagnes in the hand and they don't soul charge, they don't do anything until my next turn, where I can then Persona Ride, but by then I'm usually dead because my opponent rolled their grade 4, blew up everything, summoned God, and I died. Alright? So instead I've been messing around with this as sort of an option because she's a little bit more, has a little bit more utility than just Persona Riding. What she does is an act ability once per turn, unfortunately. If you have Baromagnes, you can put a card from your hand into the soul, and then give your front row 5,000 power. If you have 10 or more units, they get 10,000 power. So she's a pseudo Persona Ride, except I can do it on my grade 3 turn, which is nice. Obviously, if I put stuff back into the soul and then bring them back, they don't get that power, but still. it's a nice little option. This is the card that I was saying you can replace with Goemon. You can maybe even replace both of them for 2 Baromagnes if you want. It's how you really want. Most of the core of the deck is pretty much set in stone in the Brainwashers, the Selfish Engravers, the Curtises, and the Pandemonium Tactics, and I think the 2 Keeney Ludleys. Everything else you can kind of mess around with. Those are kind of your flex spots. They can be whatever you want them to be, but unfortunately there's not really a lot of flex spots. There's not really too many options that get you where you need to be. So that is the deck that I have built so far. That's the deck that I've been playing with. I'll be honest, obviously we just got these cards, so there's room for improvement. My list is mainly based on the Japanese lists that are out there, and I'm just making my own adjustments and how I felt on playing it. So I wouldn't be surprised if it evolves towards the end of this set's sort of, I don't want to say lifespan, but until the next set. I might make a follow-up video by then. If not, I might do something similar to what I did with the Nova Grappler video for Vanguard 0. If you haven't seen that yet, you'll see that in the iCard up here somewhere or in the description down below, but I kind of just went over sort of the matchups or the matchup percentages for certain decks using, you know, Nova Grappler in that video, Baromagnes it would be for this upcoming video, and stuff like that, and maybe any other build that I might have messed around with. But other than that, I wanted to go over some of the optional cards that you can play. I've gone over some of them in the first video, and most of them still apply, but here are a couple of other ones. I did have to end up cutting the Asher Da, Steam Mage Asher Da. This is, I still think, a really great card. If your soul has 70 more cards, he gets 5k power, so he's the 10k shield, and on Guardian Circle, if he's retired, he goes into soul. So it's amazing to be able to guard and then soul charge at the same time, right? But I just couldn't find space for him in the deck. Arguably, if you really want to be a little bit more defensive, you can take out maybe the Crimson Ink Spellers, put this instead, play 3 copies of that. That is, I believe, maybe a viable option. I don't know if it'll really get you that much, but I do think that the flexibility of being able to guard with 10k shield and then having them come back into soul is very, very good. Then we have ourselves a new grade 2 here from set 4, the Diabolos Madonna Reese. She's actually really cool. On hit of Vanguard, Soul Charge 2. That's it. The rest doesn't matter, as usual. It's final rush stuff for Bruce. So this is actually, you know, pretty solid. It's the fastest way to Soul Charge by attacking that we have. We don't have like an Emblem Master or anything like that, right? This is the closest that we're going to get. It's for free. The attack just has to hit. But unfortunately, the attack has to hit. So I feel like this has some potential, possibly, but if anything, it could also be used as a way to sort of like force your opponent to guard, because they know that you're going to be able to get some massive advantage in terms of being able to soul charge and get closer to 15 and whatnot. But other than that, I don't know if she's really worth it. Then we got another grade 2 here. This is actually from set 1. This is the Shadow Leak Magician. This doesn't really do anything other than the fact that it has resist. We actually do have resist in Dark States, so if you're going to your locals and I don't know, there's a bunch of your video players, or maybe even Prison, or I don't know, Eugene, or anything that really messes with your board and specifically targets your units, you can technically bring out a Shadow Leak Magician and it'll be a unit that can't be targeted by effects. So it's just an option that you have. I'm not saying it's the best option or you should play it, but I don't know if everyone's aware of this, but we do have resistant Dark States. Here we have another card from set 4. This is the Violet Blue Illusionary Butterfly Hunju. Now, this card I don't think is very good, but I have seen a couple of lists, a couple of Japanese lists where they actually use this card. I don't understand how. I don't understand how this is actually playable, but here's what she does. When you place your own rearguard circle, if you have 5 or more units, you get to counterblast 1, soul charge 3. Then if you have, I believe, 10 or more cards in your soul, you give your Vanguard 5,000 power. I don't know in what world anyone was ever able to get a full field of units with Baromagnes, right? And then being able to use this effect. We generally aren't able to do that until very late in the game, maybe, or if we just hit like every draw trigger imaginable. So the odds of actually being able to pull this off, especially in such a control heavy meta, I don't understand how this is being played, but I just figured I should bring it up. Then we have a card actually from set 2 over here. This is the Steam, not Magician, Steam Engineer Papiro. So what this does is when you place this on, or rather when this boosts a rearguard, if you Persona Root that turn. You can Counter Blast 1 and Soul Blast 1, so already 3 requirements to activate this. But that attack cannot be guarded by grade 1s, which means your opponent cannot use your grade 1 boosters or whatever, but they also cannot Sentinel the attack that this unit boosts. So this is actually pretty interesting. I do think the cost is kind of heavy to play in Baromagnes, but I have seen some lists use 1 or 2 of these. You really don't need more than 1 or 2, because you can just put it back into your soul and then bring it out later on. So you can, for example, use it on your before putting it into the soul in order to like weaken your opponent's hand, and then later on afterwards you can bring it out, force your opponent to just take the hit more or less, right? Especially if it's the last kill of the game and all they have is their PG that they held on to. Well, now they can't use it, right? So it's a very solid card. Then the last card we have here is the Gear Angel of Sudden Banks. I was really hyped about this card before the release. Once I actually got to use the card, not so hyped about it. I still think there's a lot of very good potential with this card. I just don't think I've been able to fully realize it. So what this does, this is a grade 1. When the attack of this unit boosted hits, you can retire this unit, and then you can call another grade 1 from your soul. Can be the same card. Any other grade 1 you can call. So I think this is really solid. You can use this, make Baromagnes have 7 attacks, actually. You can use this, bring out, you have several good targets to bring out. You can use this, bring out Krogra, power up your front row, get a card. You can use this to bring out your Brainwash Swirler. Soul Charge 1, he gets 13k, can swing at your grade 3 Vanguard, your opponent's grade 3 Vanguard. You can use this to bring out your Deep Sonicer, 18k attacker, right? You can have so many options that you can do with this. But unfortunately the attack does have to hit, which I think is kind of like similar to how I was talking about with Reese here, is that might not be such a bad thing, because you can sort of force your opponent to guard something that they don't really want to guard, right? If I come at you with these 2 things, and you know that if this attack hits, not only will I Soul Charge 2, but I would also be able to call another unit and attack you with it, you might more than likely guard this. But then I have my, Brainwash Swirler column and my Vanguard about to attack you as well, so you might end up wasting a guard on something that you would have maybe more than likely wanted to take, right? So I don't know, it's just an option. I'm gonna try and mess around with the Eagle in a couple of different other builds of this deck and see if I can get it to work. So that's basically the deck for set 4. Let me go ahead and show you a little bit of your sort of optimal play. So let's say you're here on your Electro Spartan and it's the beginning of your turn. You can go ahead and discard your card to ride. Let's go ahead and ride Baromagnes here. Then, using Electro Spartan's skill, we're going to go ahead and enter in a Quigron that we have in hand into the soul. Draw 1 card, and then we're going to be able to Soul Charge 1. Then from here we can, for example, go ahead and play our Brainwash Swirler. His effect allows him to Soul Charge 1. Then our good old Brainwash Swirler is going to get +5 from his ability. We can go ahead and maybe do that just one more time here and give this new Brainwash Swirler, after we Soul Charge, +5. Then the first one gets a +5 as well. After that, let's go ahead and let's play 2 of our Phantasm Magician Curtises here. Each of them allows us to Soul Charge 2 cards. So let's go ahead and Soul Charge 4 essentially, which then, as you may or may not have guessed it, means that our boys get even stronger. So we're going to go ahead and give them an additional 20k power here. Then, finally, we can go ahead and activate a Pandemonium Tactics. Let's go ahead and Counterblast 1 here, and we can Soul Charge 4 more cards, putting us at a definite 15. On top of that, our boards are going to get even bigger, so big that I've actually run out of these little markers. Then I have to go and resort to using dice here. So we're going to go ahead and place these dice here. Each of those will be 10k, and then now we're ready to swing. So not only do we have 2 massive columns, a Vanguard that can get a critical and 10,000 power, we also have 2 more attacks that we can do after that. So let's go ahead and swing with Curtis here, boosted by our Brainwash Swirler. 13 plus 8 is 21. Then if we add up all of these boosts, we got 21, 31, 51, 61, 71 power straight at your opponent's face. And then we can go ahead and do that for this one in as well, and that's going to be just about the same power. It's going to be, I believe it's 66 instead. Both really huge numbers. In order to guard these attacks without a PG, you would need to do, if I take this for my damage, so if you use 2 of your triggers to guard, that's going to be at most 30 plus your Vanguard's power, assuming they're at grade 3. That's only going to be 43, so you're going to need to use more than 2 cards of your maximum guard potential in order to block these attacks. Then after that, you can go ahead and take your Baromagnes, counterblast 1 for your skill, draw 1, he gets an additional critical, as well as the 10,000 power that we're going to go ahead and steal from this guy. And then all units on both sides of the board go into the soul, which not only lets you get more units on board to be able to attack, but also wipes your opponent's resources if they had any set up just yet. So ideally, if you can go second with this deck, it'd be great if your opponent made a decent push on their grade 3 turn. But we're going to go ahead and give these units 10,000 power because they came out from the soul. Then we can go ahead and activate their abilities to give them 5 to each other, and then Baromagnes, being a unit in the front row, will get another 10. So now Baromagnes will go ahead and attack for 33 and an additional critical, and still has a drive check, which here gives us nothing. But we still have 2 more attacks that can hit for 30, right? And we can more or less do that every single turn. While we can't use Brainwash Swirler to power up and swing in every turn, we can definitely hit 5 attacks with an additional critical every single turn. That's the deck. For now, that's how I'm going to be playing Baromagnes in set 4. Again, I might make some updates in the future, but nonetheless, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope I helped you get a good understanding how Baromagnes plays in set 4. If I missed out on anything, if you have any more options, or I misspoke about something, please let me know in the comments down below. Or if you hated the video, go ahead and let me know in the comments down below. That way I can improve in the future. But until then, take care of yourself.